Los Angeles today. I'm Brooks Melchior. This is Sports by Brooks on Fancred. Glad you've joined us. Glad you've downloaded the app and you're with us. We'll be here every single day, weekdays, starting at noon Eastern time. Coming up later, we're going to talk to Albert Breer of Monday Morning Quarterback, MMQB of Sports Illustrated, and we'll talk NFL. A lot of interesting things going on in the league, including last night, of course. What a scene and a sight Nick Bosa was. Baker Mayfield, Bosa in the locker room. If you've looked at my Twitter, which I would imagine you have if you're here, scroll down and you can see Nick Bosa video from the locker room after the game. It was extraordinary video. Speaking of extraordinary, the story we get from Mike Silver coming out of that game yesterday, where Richard Sherman reported that Baker Mayfield would not shake hands with the captains of the 49ers before last night's game. Of course, Baker Mayfield had a major incident. It wasn't just a little thing. Back in November of 2017, you may remember where when Oklahoma played Kansas, Mayfield was quarterbacking the Sooners for that game. The Kansas players would not shake Mayfield's hand before the game. And Mayfield went nuts on the sidelines, grabbing his crotch, cursing the Jayhawks throughout the game. This is like throughout the game. He ended up on national television, and Mayfield was shamed into giving an apology after the game and then later releasing a statement. So he did last night to Richard Sherman and the Niners what the Jayhawks did to him in 2017, and you see his reaction. So we'll talk a little bit about the NFL at the top of the hour, but we're going to get to what's going on, what's breaking, what's happening. It's fluid, it's moving. That's what's so great about Twitter and TweetDeck. If you don't have TweetDeck, get it, because you can waterfall the updates the entire time. It's like a stock ticker. It's a beautiful thing. And the search function is everything. So that's what I'm following 24/7 as I follow this NBA China story. People may refer to it as the Daryl Morey tweet reaction story, but it's really no such thing, at least in the context of the Chinese people, the citizens of China. Of course, we're led to believe that this whole thing is because the fans of China are upset at Daryl Morey, right, for what he did. That's why all of this is happening. It's because the people of China are angry. The problem with that is, and it couldn't be more untrue, the problem with that is there's no Twitter in China. It doesn't exist and hasn't for over a decade. They have their own government sponsored, just like everything else in China, Twitter, Weibo, Weibo. So everything that goes through social media goes through Weibo. And so that's how the Chinese people found out about what Daryl Morey was up to. And they didn't find out about it in a social media posting. They found out about it through Chinese Central Television, CCTV, reporting the tweet. That's how they found out. And Chinese Central Television, to give you an idea, being a state-run television broadcaster, taking its orders, of course, from the government, called out Adam Silver, commissioner of the NBA, today in a public statement and reporting that the Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets, who have 2 games this week, will be blacked out in China. Now, I'm assuming we'll be able to see it here, right? You would think. We've got an ESPN crew over there, Rachel Nichols, Richard Jefferson. All right. Presumably, the games, which are scheduled for Thursday and Saturday, are going to be played. But now you're starting to wonder, especially when you get the rhetoric that we got from the Chinese government on a couple of different occasions today. And make no mistake, and I'll read some of it to you so you can hear what the Chinese government is saying directly to the NBA commissioner and directly to Daryl Morey. Yesterday, the state-run news website of the Chinese government directly demanded an apology from Daryl Morey. In case you're wondering if he apologized, we can now confirm he didn't, because the Chinese are demanding, and he actually didn't. But that's what this has come to. And the NBA stuck because you got games coming up Thursday and Saturday. You got ESPN there, right? You've got Americans killing you from inside the United States. It's a PR disaster internally in the US. And of course, the Chinese government is making sure that's going to continue. And it is going to continue through the week. And I might add, all of the things that you're hearing about, all of the sanctions, all of the shutdowns, all of the embargoes and the boycotts, they're all temporary because China does this every day to businesses around the world that are trying to operate in China. These sorts of scare tactics are the oldest thing in the Chinese playbook when it comes to the government's interfacing with business. And of course, we've all enabled it. We've enabled it in the biggest possible way, in so many different ways, right? And you know what I'm talking about. So this is not going to stop. You're going to continue to see the Chinese going after Adam Silver, shutting down the NBA. And why are they doing this? Why are they continuing to do this? Why are they now ratcheting it up? Now they're directly confronting the commissioner, Adam Silver. Now they're directly confronting Daryl Morey because they know they have the leverage. They know we're stuck over there, the NBA. And most importantly, they know that this is a tremendous, and I said this yesterday, this is everything. This is everything. Listen closely. All that matters in this situation is the ability that the Chinese government has to suppress and control the population. You can only beat down that population so much. You can only pay off that population so much when you're trying to get loyalty. At some point, you have to do something else to maintain that loyalty that you really don't deserve. So how do you do that? You manufacture external threats. And that's what this is. What happened was Daryl Morey sent that tweet out. All right. And here's another big part of the story. There's so many big parts of the story that everybody is not talking. They're either not talking about it, they're missing it. It's unbelievable. But what prompted Daryl Morey to send out that tweet about Hong Kong? Well, right now, there's protests going on in Hong Kong. It's up for grabs in Hong Kong because the Chinese government is now trying to institute a new law that forbids the wearing of masks, believe it or not, in public. And this has caused a huge outcry in Hong Kong. It just shows you how sensitive the people are in this situation to what's happening and how sensitive they are to any sort of rollback. But just the fact that the Chinese government's trying to ban masks being worn in public has caused these massive protests. There's a lot of disruption going on today as we're speaking in Hong Kong. So figure that in. And that's one of the reasons why Daryl Morey tweeted, because he had some concerns reportedly about people he knows in Hong Kong. All right. So he sends out that, I guess, well-meaning tweet. He should have known better, knowing that the Rockets are China's team because of Yao Ming. He should have known better. It was irresponsible, in my opinion, for him to do that at that time. It was. So you send that one tweet out, right? And we don't know if the Chinese government caught it initially, grabbed it, and then blared it all over China. Look at this. Can you believe it? Right? Ugly American. Threatening our sovereignty, meddling in our internal affairs. And that's a lot of the rhetoric you get. We're getting it right now in the way they're addressing Daryl Morey in the state-run news outlet today, demanding an apology. But he sends the tweet out as we're having protests in Hong Kong. And make no mistake, Hong Kong is China. It's not part of China. It is China. People need to get over that. It sucks. North Korea sucks, right? There's a lot of countries who suck, but there's nothing we can do about it. And it's not our role to do anything about it. And to a certain extent, I can somewhat understand the Chinese having a concern about people in the United States affiliated with China's team, the Rockets, tweeting out support of Hong Kong right in the middle of a big protest and disruption of this situation. And you probably know the background of Hong Kong, which went over into Chinese hands in 1997, transferred from the British, and freedoms are being rolled back, and they're going to be continued to roll back. It sucks. It sucks. But Daryl Morey, he should have known better. Now, understand, and you know, I'm not justifying what the Chinese are doing, and I'm going to tell you what they're doing here in a second. Nobody's doing that. Recognize that. I'm telling you the reality of the situation. And I'm trying to make sense of what the Chinese are doing because nobody's going to tell you. Nobody's going to be able to figure it out as well as I can figure it out and tell you. So you're in the middle of these protests right now in Hong Kong. It's an incendiary environment and has been for some time. What previously happened earlier in the year was the Chinese government tried to enact a new law enabling extradition from Hong Kong to the mainland, right? When it came to a legal situation, right? And that was the first wave of huge protests that you saw earlier this year. It was about this extradition, and the Chinese backed down. Now they're trying to add this new law about masks. And so we have a disruption. That's the backdrop of Morey tweeting. He's tweeting to an audience that does not include Chinese citizens on the mainland. All right? Nobody in China, unless they have a VPN, I guess, or they work for the government, saw the tweet. That's crucial to understand as to why the situation is where it is. It has nothing to do with what Joseph Tsai, the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, the owner of Alibaba, the largest online retailer in China, claimed in his open letter to the public about the situation in China. He claimed in the letter this whole situation has happened because of the discontent of 1.4 million Chinese basketball fans. All right? It's not true. So Morey sends that tweet out. The Chinese government sees it. Or perhaps they saw the reply by Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta, who rebuked and condemned Daryl Morey almost immediately after that tweet, saying that he doesn't represent the views of the Rockets. Okay? Because Fertitta understands, what Morey what the Rockets represent in China. Forget about, Fertitta may have individual business interests in China, whatever, right? But so what? Throw out the personal aspect. The Rockets are an institution in China, period. So when Morey does that, there's a certain responsibility. I understand that they don't have Twitter in China. Yeah, but they've got a government that's in place and in power based on its ability to propagate propaganda, which it uses to control its people. That's how it maintains power in peacetime, right? A big part of it. Of course, violent suppression, concentration camps, work camps, all those things exist in China. They'll just turn the internet off in big regions of the country if there's unrest. I recognize that. But propaganda is the most important element. And creating external threats is everything to control that population. So now the Chinese government sees that. And what are they going to do? They're going to take that tweet and they're going to relay it through initially Twitter. The Chinese government replied to it on Twitter and then disseminated it through Weibo eventually, which is Chinese Twitter that the government runs. They run everything. Ultimately, every single thing that you're seeing, like today, this streaming company, Tencent is what it's called. It's this enormous company that streams the NBA to China. And they've got a $500 million deal with the NBA. 10 Cent came out today, not 50 Cent, right? 10 Cent came out, this company in China, and said, we're shutting down all NBA broadcasts indefinitely today. And that announcement came today, just after China Central Television announced that it was blacking out the Lakers and the Nets game. Thursday and Saturday. Those are two games, right? And in the process, and I'm going to read you what was released by the Chinese government in that context. And I'm also going to read you some of the comments from Adam Silver, hopefully, if we get an opportunity throughout the show. But getting back to the very basics, and my whole point about 10 Cent was that announcement came right after the government-run state broadcaster made its announcement and condemned Adam Silver. It was a shot across the bow in the process. And so Adam Silver did a press conference this morning, the NBA commissioner. All right? And you talk about a muted presentation, a hedging, parsing presentation, speaking softly, doing whatever he could possibly do. But he's in an impossible situation. It doesn't matter what he says. That's how these regimes work. It does not matter. That's where, if you know your history, you know that the NBA should not be there. They should cancel the games themselves and leave right now. They should understand that these sanctions are temporary, that this is a huge bluff and a scare tactic, but they're not doing it. The NBA has leverage in the situation, but you'd never know it because they don't know their history. They don't know enough about China, but other regimes who've been doing this since the beginning of time. So listen to this statement by Chinese Central Television today, directed at Adam Silver in announcing the blackout of these games this week. So this is the translated version of what came out of the Chinese government. We have noticed that Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, who is participating in an event in Japan, that was the press conference this morning where he spoke, and I'll read you some of his remarks in a minute, has responded to Houston Rockets general manager Morey's post of inappropriate Hong Kong-related remarks. We are strongly dissatisfied, and we oppose Silver's claim to support Maury's right of free expression. Let me repeat that. This is the Chinese government addressing Adam Silver today. We are strongly dissatisfied, and we oppose Silver's claim to support Maury's right of free expression, which is what Adam Silver referred to in his press conference. Right? Is that all that unreasonable? It is in China. Not all the time, but just whenever the government decides. Faceless bureaucrats. So let me go on here. The government continues. We believe that any speech that challenges national sovereignty and social stability is not within the scope of freedom of speech. To this end, CCTV Sports Channel of the Central Radio and Television Administration, man, this is right out of like Stalin, Soviet Union kind of stuff here. I love this. It's the CCTV Sports Channel of the Central Radio and Television Administration. Use your old 50s voice, the black and white film. Has decided to immediately suspend the current broadcast arrangements of the NBA preseason China games. That's the Lakers and the Nets. And immediately investigate all cooperation and exchanges involving the NBA. That's pretty open-ended, isn't it? So we're going to suspend all broadcasts indefinitely. And so that was from the government, okay? And that was followed by another announcement from that company, Tencent, in which Tencent announced it was suspending streaming NBA preseason games. Now, Tencent had previously announced 2 days ago it was only suspending the streaming of Rockets games, but now it's the whole NBA. So that's where we are. And Tencent, of course, it might as well be the government. Everything comes from the government. It all started with the government. And the greatest example is what I gave you right off the top. There's no Twitter. It was a tweet. The government passed the tweet on with its interpretation to Chinese citizens. That's how it happened. Now, the reaction of Chinese citizens is still immaterial. Is still not all that important, right? What matters is what the hell the government's doing. So we see now what's happening in how the Chinese government approaches this situation. We know that the Chinese government is focused on one thing and one thing only in this situation: an opportunity to manufacture an external threat to the sovereignty of the country, right? That's what this is all about. And of course, you could argue that's what Daryl Morey's tweet represented. And he's the general manager of China's team, the Rockets. Yao Ming. Earlier today, in fact, right before I came on the air, this came out about Yao Ming, and I just did a tweet on it. Let me see if I can find where he's. Yao Ming is apparently upset too. So, I mean, what are you going to do? Look, if you study Germany throughout the National Socialist period, in other words, the Nazis, if you study the Soviet Union, right? If you study authoritarian regimes, and you read today tweets that were sent out about Rachel Nichols, actually, bless her heart, from ESPN, wonderful lady, great talent. She sends this out. All right. Rachel Nichols tweeted from NBA Jump. Adam Silver said, this is today, Adam Silver says he plans to meet with Yao Ming, who is now the chairman of the Chinese Basketball Association. Adam Silver has this quote from Rachel Nichols. Quote, I'm hoping to get together. Oh, she wrote it wrong. I'm hoping to get together with Yao, and hopefully we can find an accommodation. But he is extremely hot at the moment, and I understand it. Right. Okay. The reason I brought up those previous regimes, authoritarian regimes, dictatorial regimes, is if you go back to those regimes and you study them, you see guys like Max Schmeling, the famous boxer in Germany before World War II, who was utilized for propaganda purposes in his bouts against American heavyweight champion Joe Louis, right? This stuff has been going on forever, where governments utilize entertainment figures, which, by the way, and this hasn't been reported anywhere in the United States, but I found it by translating Chinese media reports early this morning. You've now got entertainment figures in China who are on television, one of them was a rapper. There's a Chinese rapper. They're now coming out against the NBA and Daryl Morey specifically. Daryl Morey literally is the Antichrist right now in China. He is the perfect straw man. And I want to read you a statement that was made about Morey that I need to find. But so my point about the Yao Ming thing is nothing could be more ridiculous and inconsequential in the context of, right, the idea that Yao Ming is hot. He's hot. Okay? You can't take anything at face value. Yet, it's being sent out there and it's being represented as completely legitimate. Now, I'm not saying Yao Ming isn't a nationalist. I'm not saying that Yao Ming, I don't know what kind of relationship he has with Daryl Morey. Morey was there when he was a player, beginning in 2006, right? Yao played 8 years with the Rockets in the 2000s, and Morey was there for part of his career. I don't know what their relationship is, but anything that comes out in the public, right? You can't take, as some of it is true, just inevitably, right? So every single piece of information that you see, right? I just, if it's China, I just default don't believe it. And I think about why would this come out? Now, some of it's legitimate, some of it isn't. But why are all these things happening? You have to think that way. And how do they maintain power in that country? What is the aim? Knowing that these sanctions are temporary. China does this every day. It's nothing new. The rockets will be back in China. The streaming will be turned back on. It's not going away. Understand that. And that brings us to me, the biggest unreported part of this story. This is Brooks of Sports by Brooks on Fancred. Coming up in about half an hour, we'll talk to Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated, MMQB. Sports by Brooks on Fancred, weekdays, Monday through Friday, beginning at noon Eastern time. My producer today is Cam Smith in Boston. He's got his feet up today. Relaxed. But dude, does that guy work? Oh my goodness, Cam. So the biggest unreported part of this story, completely altogether unacknowledged, remarkably, I'm sure it's being mentioned on cable news in passing, but that story is the vacuum at the top of the United States government. Okay? Our president, Donald Trump, if he wants to get involved, believe me, he'll get involved. He'll get involved up to his eyebrows. But he's not getting involved here. And why is that? Who knows? But there's probably a couple of reasons that there are a couple of reasons that I can think of that are possibilities. Number one, he's been going back and forth with China on trade since he came in as president. And that is a ongoing topic and issue as far as Trump is concerned, his ability to get reelected is concerned, and a lot of Americans and their pocketbook, their income is concerned. Tariffs, things like that, are trade agreements with China. So that's been going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And we've gotten a lot of very, very ebullient rhetoric from the president when it comes to dealing with China. And I don't know exactly where we are in that relationship right now, but my guess is we're probably dealing from a position of, let's just say, not strength. If he was dealing from a position of strength, he may be coming out and talking about this. But that said, I think, at least in his mind or the administration's mind, the idea of Trump supporting the NBA, you know where I'm going. The idea of him supporting Americans for the sake of supporting Americans, even though they might not represent his constituency, even though there's some people in that group of individuals who perhaps have criticized him in the past, right? He's still our president. He's everybody's president, and he's going to stick up for Americans abroad, especially when they're promoting the principle of democracy. Right? Right? There's an echo in here, right? Right. Yeah. Empty. Nothing. Not a peep. Not a coincidence. Nothing could be less of a coincidence than Trump not weighing in on a subject like this. When you think about the publicity that you could get from weighing in on this subject, but clearly he thinks it's a zero sum to, I think more than anything, it's probably the fact that he has no interest in siding with a group of people who criticize him and who don't necessarily represent the demographic of the individuals who are going to vote for him or who he could convince to vote for him. Right? That would be my guess. So, but if you think about the past, think about past presidents in your lifetime, my lifetime. Outside of this president, I can't imagine this situation going on right now and that president not weighing in some form or fashion. Right? Now, I could be out to lunch here. Sorry. Like a lot of you, I tuned out of cable news a long time ago, especially once we got into the administration of Donald Trump. Once we got a couple of years in, I really couldn't take it anymore. So I don't watch much. I'm assuming he's being asked in press conferences, right? Media opportunities about it. Obviously, I would like to think, but nothing is being reported. At least nothing is being headlined or splashed or promoted. He's not stumping. So it's probably a combination of no way in hell he wants to get anywhere near the NBA and help them at all. And he's dealing with the Chinese 24/7 on the trade agreement situation. Just trade in general. That's one of the central tenets. Of course, if you're Trump in this situation, if you're forget about Trump, if you're the president of the United States, look, We can't mess around with Hong Kong. You don't do that because you don't want the Chinese messing around with Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands or Hawaii, right? You don't want people messing around with Hawaii, just like they don't want us sticking our nose in Hong Kong, especially when there's protests. Understandable. Now, I don't know if our current president really looks at it that way, that other countries are sovereign nations. Maybe he does, but that's not really my sense. But, and I think that was lost a little bit on Daryl Morey. I think what has really driven Daryl Morey in sending that tweet out more than anything from news reports and people who've talked about his personal life, he knows some people in Hong Kong. He knows some people there, worried about them, but I'm not so sure tweeting that's going to help. So, but to get back to the elephant, the orange elephant in the room, right? The fact that there's no leadership at the top of the government, I would imagine the State Department and, diplomatic mission in China has got to be heavily involved. You would think, right? Who knows? I mean, that in the past, if you had a situation like this in the past, that's what happens. That's what happens. You don't have a government, doing this to the commissioner of one of our esteemed institutions, right? You just don't. There's some sort of intervention that takes place. You don't have these kinds of weird confrontations. And I think that because it's so unusual, it's really unprecedented that the media is just straight reporting. And when you have sports reporters reporting on what's happening in China, what the Chinese, the machinations of the propaganda machine that is the Chinese government. That's what it is, right? It's all about hiding what's behind the curtain 24/7. That's the basis of any authoritarian regime. When you have sports media reporting on it, and that's what everybody's seeing, reading, hearing, you get nothing. It doesn't make sense, except the NBA's botching it. And they are botching it. Like everybody else, they don't understand the situation. So we don't have any support there. Clearly, we don't. Clearly. Adam Silver's trying to manage a situation that's absolutely unmanageable because it's based on a pretense of something that doesn't exist. The idea that the Chinese people are up in arms. They're devastated, as Brooklyn Nets owner Joseph Tsai said in his open letter. They're devastated. That's the issue. They're extremely disappointed. No, they're not. It's a lie. But we're going along with it. We take it at face value because we don't know any better, because we don't know anything about what's happening. That's the problem. If you do, then you call China's bluff and you cancel the games, which hopefully will happen soon. Now, another big part of the story that I guess you could look at it as it's better left unsaid, or maybe people aren't thinking what I'm thinking. But my thought is when you see someone like Steve Kerr and the video of Steve Kerr, who is someone who's not shy about commenting about President Trump or political issues, right? At all. Just like Greg Popovich of the Spurs. And I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody who's really enthusiastic about giving us their viewpoint on what's happening, but political and otherwise. But as far as this issue, Steve Kerr didn't say anything. I mean, the only thing he said really did a disservice to the situation. I'll read you what he said here. Let's go down. So he referred to the situation. This is Steve Kerr, the guy who luxuriates in talking about and tweeting about the United States government, and in doing so, interfaces with geopolitics. Anytime you're talking about the United States government, I'm not saying he shouldn't do that. That's fine. But the idea that what you're saying when you're talking about the president or the government or a major issue in this country, it reverberates around the world, right? I don't think anybody could dispute that. But he refers to this story in China, Steve Kerr yesterday in talking to the media, as a bizarre international story that is something I'm reading about just like everybody else. Right? That was his comment. Other than that, no opinion on it. Right? Now, I hear those remarks from someone who's very enthusiastic about talking politics in the media, in the sports media. And we get that. So to me, it's one of two things. It's, okay, we've got NBA people over there. We got teams over in China. Maybe I should lay low on this. Well, if that's the case, why are you at a press conference? Why are you even talking about it? What's funny about Steve Kerr in this situation is if you watch the video of him when he's asked the question, the first thing he says is, I've got no comment. And then you know what's coming next. He comments. Just can't help himself. Can't contain himself. Just has to unburden himself. So then he goes on and blathers on about nothing. But so it's either he's not saying anything because he's worried about the people in China. He doesn't want to complicate things for the people in China. Makes sense. Well, if that's the case again, shouldn't be out there commenting, or stick to your no comment. He didn't do either. And then there's the other side of it. Maybe he's just an a-hole. He's just an arrogant ass. Because someone who is seemingly, at least he portrays himself this way, and I'm not criticizing him. I don't know him. I don't have an opinion on him one way or another. I really don't. But someone who is normally, portrays himself as kind of a sophisticated political observer who's up on the issues, right? And to be up on the issues in the United States is to be up on the issues around the world. Not necessarily intimately or specifically in detail, but it goes without saying that we're all interconnected, especially in a place like the United States. The rest of the world looks to us to lead. That's how it works. And this guy's an international guy, international man of mystery, Steve Kerr. So for him to call this story a bizarre international story, something I'm reading about just like everybody, he's in the effing NBA. Give me a break. He's reading about it. He's not talking to anybody. Maybe he isn't. Right? He doesn't know anybody with the Rockets or the league office or people that are connected to the city at all. He has no curiosity other than what you and I are reading. Okay. No, what that is disingenuous, and he thinks we're dummies. He's patronizing us. We're dummies. And a lot of people are. But that does nothing to help the situation. In fact, it only makes it worse because now people are going to talk about Steve Kerr's cop-out. He'd be better off saying nothing. Right? The other part of this situation is if he's worried about Americans in China right now, he's worried about saying something, their well-being. They shouldn't be there. We shouldn't have an office there. Right? And in fact, I don't think we should. I think we should threaten to leave. Call China's bluff. Because I'll guarantee you they back down. Maybe not right now, but they will eventually. So, but that's the worst possible response in my mind Steve Kerr can give in that situation, right? So I just talked about canceling the games. I've talked about it throughout this discussion. And that's something that should be done right now. All right? Right now. You've got no support system from the United States government that we know of. If you do, they're not doing a very good job. Right? Maybe you should release them from their duties. You're in an impossible situation. You are caught in the gears of the biggest propaganda machine in the world, in history. And they smell blood, obviously. This is the ultimate opportunity for China to get over with its own people, creating that external threat, bringing the people closer to them, more loyal to them, eliminating internal enemies, gaining leverage. I said it yesterday. That's why Kim Jong-un does those stupid, out of North Korea, missile tests. All he's trying to do is get someone from another country to say something. Then he takes that back to his people. See, we're under attack. Existential threat. Right? I'm the great father here. It's that paternalism. That's how you manufacture loyalty. And that's what the Chinese are doing here. And they are going to continue to double down. Why not? See what they're doing? They're making it worse. They're ratcheting it up. They're requiring more. They're blacking the games out. They're demanding an apology now. They're overtly confronting Adam Silver now, right? Based on what? Look, I recognize, I already mentioned it. Hong Kong's an issue. There's protests right now. And Daryl Morey shouldn't have sent that tweet out. That was stupid. He shouldn't have. Right? But that hasn't changed in this period of time. And Adam Silver's hedging rhetoric this morning, supporting what the Chinese, or saying what the Chinese already knows he has to say. He's got no choice. He's got no choice. It's a perfect situation, though, because the Chinese were playing a road game here, right? And Adam Silver is on an island in the United States right now. Nobody supports him on either side, and they deserve it to a certain extent. They deserve it. Right? And it started for me with the James Harden apology, the empty apology for nothing. Typical. See, you can do that in the United States. That's fine. People go along. People go along with Jalen Ramsey being injured, pretending. Put him on the injury list. And then he ends up with Deshaun Foster hanging out at Chipotle after the Texans game in Houston on Sunday. We'll go along with Stefan Diggs being injured, right? We will. We'll delude ourselves. If you got enough money and you got a certain logo on your business card, you can get away with it, right? You can't get away with it with the Chinese government. They make all the rules. They decide, right? Doesn't matter how big your company is. Doesn't matter how famous you are. Doesn't matter if you're Walmart, which the Chinese essentially kicked the hell out of China, right? That's what you're dealing with. Up is down, right? It's all about a tweet, and China doesn't have Twitter. That sums it up, right? And it's all about maintaining power. How do you do that? And if you're Adam Silver in the situation, it couldn't be more clear. If you know anything, if you're paying attention, you're not going to lose your business if you cancel the game and leave. You're just not. And ultimately, I mean, that's what's got to happen. You're going to play that game in China and it's blacked out in China? That's a surrender. And that's another notch in the belt for the government as it pertains to its relationship with the people of China, right? They're still playing, even though we're blacking it out. You know, we're running things here. Listen to us. The NBA is going along no matter how absurd or ridiculous or draconian or reactionary the things that we do to them, they go along. So should you, right? And that's what makes this so tragically regrettable. But we've been doing this for a long time. I mean, the Olympic Games are the ultimate example, going along. We went along with Adolf Hitler in 1936 in the Berlin Games. We enabled his regime when it was on the ropes. We had American officials in Berlin before those 1936 games wiring Franklin Delano Roosevelt, begging him to boycott. Don't bring Americans over here for the Olympic Games. Hitler's on the ropes politically, right? There were Germans coming to our diplomats in Berlin saying, tell Roosevelt, don't send the team. He's on the ropes. If you guys come over, you're going to validate him to the people of Germany, and you're going to consolidate his power, ensure a future for the Nazi. And that's what happened. That's what happened. And I'm not making that up. I studied it for a long time. And that's what's happening right now to a certain extent with our participation. We're validating this absurd system. And it's tragic. I mean, and look, I mean, unfortunately, nobody's happy about what's going on in Hong Kong, but there's nothing you could do about it. And you have to be aware of what you're dealing with. And we stepped in it, and we keep stepping in it, right? I mean, what more do the Chinese need to tell you, need to do, right? But of course, the Chinese government just assume you stay, and we'll just keep taking things away from you. We'll keep marginalizing the NBA, right? We'll continue to roll back the things that we're doing with you. For now, when you leave, we'll rescind them. And the 600 million Chinese who watch Tencent, that streaming service, they'll get those Rockets games, you know, right after you leave. That's what's going to happen. I mean, that's what's going to happen. So understanding that history makes it a lot clearer when you look at what's happening right now, because, you know, and this is something I haven't mentioned to this point. And what really sucks is I've been listening to sports radio and talk shows and everything, and especially the politicians, the high profile politicians, Elizabeth Warren, right? Wayne, Beto O'Rourke, all of these people, right? Grandstanding. That's all it is. Speaking of propaganda, right? And Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and Rick Scott wants a meeting with Adam Silver. Right. 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 What about the companies in China besides the NBA? Do you want a meeting with them, Rick? Do you want a meeting with Apple, Google? They're both over there. Amazon? I don't hear you asking for meetings. What the hell is the difference? There's no difference. It's just like immigration. What about the companies that are employing illegal immigrants? What about those companies? Are immigrants coming across the border? We're not really sure there are going to be any jobs here. Right. Well, they'd probably stay home if that was the case, you know? So it's a total grandstand play. And all it does is enable the Chinese, right? Enable the Chinese government, the despotic regime that it is. And you know what? In my heart of hearts, I would love for the NBA to permanently pull out of China. That would be great. At the very least, the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, who just bought the team and who owns the number one online retailer in China, Alibaba, Joseph Tsai, right? I'm not saying force him to sell the team, but it's really hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine him continuing to own the team based on his actions over the last week. What he wrote about Daryl Morey, the misrepresentation of the situation in China for his own financial end with Alibaba. But now he's doubling down. He's brazen. What does he do? Alibaba is like an Amazon it is the Amazon of China, right? What's happened at Alibaba? They have taken all the Houston Rockets merchandise off the website, delisted it. The owner of the Brooklyn Nets owns and operates Alibaba, that site in China, and they've removed the Rockets. All right. This on the heels of Joseph Tsai, same Nets owner, who put out an open letter, if you don't know, a couple of days ago, where he condemned Daryl Morey, Houston GM, for his tweet. And then he went on to say, well, this is all about the fans. This is all about the people of China up in arms. This is a disgrace, right? We've got to respect the sovereignty. It's all the, he's calling Hong Kong the people of Hong Kong who are protesting against the mask law, separatists, right? That's a big fat lie. It's not true. They're protesting the law. I'm sure there's individual examples of people who are trying to break away, but it's not going to happen. There are no, I should say there are no, but a separatist movement in Hong Kong, there's absolutely no chance that something like that's going to happen. None. I don't care what President Trump says about it. Right? But that's what Joseph Tsai says in his open, it's a separatist movement in Hong Kong. This is the owner of the Nets in a letter about Daryl Morey and criticism of him. An open letter that nobody asked for. He just bought the Nets. Takes the Rockets merchandise off his website, which is a huge site in China. And that guy is going to continue to own an NBA franchise. Well, if the media says nothing, if nobody holds him accountable, I guess, what's funny about this situation is, and I'm sure there's a lot of money involved, but what I see in here is like the 10-cent deal, the streaming service. The NBA has a $500 million deal over, I believe, 5 years, $100 million a year. That's nothing for the whole league, right? Are we really making that much money, or is it always going to be potential? Well, how much potential is there going to be when you're dealing with this? Right? Ask Walmart. They're gone. Ask a lot of companies who were there a long time. Gone. Yeah. There are no rules. And in this particular case, the irony of this situation is, right, with all the criticism that the NBA is getting, this is like mission accomplished for the Chinese. We are fueling the ability of the Chinese government to suppress their own people, right? I'm listening to these talk show hosts. I'm listening to this guy this morning. It's unbelievable, and he's got his own reasons for ripping into the NBA. Dog whistling all over the place. Right, that's happening all over the country, and we know they do that with the talk show hosts. Do that with the NBA, of course they do, and that's what I heard this morning. Can't wait, or maybe it's the Jews this time with Adam Silver. Adam Silver, right? These a-holes on the radio. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's what I'm hearing. And I've been in the talk show business a long time. And it made me sick this morning to hear just the wild screaming and yelling about the NBA transgender thing with politics in Charlotte. And now they won't stand up for the people of Hong Kong. It's like, F you. F you. Hong Kong. Like you care, right? Like that's going to happen. Like Daryl Morey, holding up Daryl Morey, this guy they'd never heard of, these talk show hosts, before this issue, as this freedom fighter. Okay. No, I mean, Daryl Morey should have known better. And every American is on the side. Well, you would think every American is on the side of Hong Kong for the most part, at least the principle. But people who contort that situation for their own ends, right, in order to stir people, the whole aim is to stir people up. Oh, yeah. All those black guys in the NBA, get them, right? All that money they're making. By the way, that's another thing. Money. How much money people make in sports. Good Lord. It's the most overdone thing. It's 24/7. I don't know what is more of a cliche, money or slow motion video. Talking about people's salaries or slow-mo. Albert Breer is with Monday Morning Quarterback Sports Illustrated, and he joins us here on Sports by Brooks on Fancred. We're going to shift gears now and talk some NFL with ace reporter Bert Breer. How you doing, Bert?
Hey, Brooks, what's up?
You are all business today, are you not?
You like the tie?
You're always all business.
Purple really
man.
pops.
By the way, I love those Periscope shows.
That's what I've gotten such phenomenal feedback for those. They it's a great way to interact with people, and yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. I talk kind of fast. I have a lot to say, so it puts a governor on me being long-winded, which is really good for me.
And I'm always wondering, okay, is he at home or is he at El Pollo Loco or is he at the elevator? That's part of the fun. So
yeah.
But let's talk about the aftermath of the Browns.
Yep.
And here's my specific question, because I think we saw this a couple of weeks ago with Baker Mayfield. The offensive line for the Browns, is that an unreported story, or is this really all about the Niners defense?
I mean, honestly, Brooks, this is something we could have seen coming a long time ago. I think in the spring and the summer, there was internal concern about where they were at. I don't think they properly addressed it. And if you want to look at the talent they've had go out the door over the last 4 years, 2016, they lost Alex Mack and Mitchell Schwartz. Alex Mack's obviously an all-pro level center. Mitchell Schwartz starting right tackle for the Chiefs. They lose Joe Thomas last year, Hall of Fame left tackle, and then Kevin Zeitler, another Pro Bowl level player at guard. That's 4 high-level offensive linemen that are gone, and their attempts to replace those guys haven't gone all that well. I mean, Greg Robinson obviously was a swing at fixing somebody else's bust, and then they draft Austin Corbett high in the second round in 2018. He's supposed to be the replacement for Zeitler, and that didn't work out. And so you certainly have seen the problems coming down the pike, and I'm just telling you, like, this is one of those issues when you've got a problem on the offensive line. A, it takes a while to fix it, and B, it's really, really hard to cover it up while it's there.
Can Baker Mayfield play?
I think so.
Can he play?
I mean, I think so. I just, again, like, and look, like I'm guilty of thinking that he was going to have a Wentz, Mahomes type of second year, right? Like, I thought that was going to happen. I was wrong about that. But I think if you look at one thing that both Wentz and Mahomes had, they had elite offensive lines, and they both had elite play callers. Carson Wentz had Doug Peterson. He's playing behind Jason Peters and Brandon Brooks and Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson. Patrick Mahomes has one of the best play callers of his generation, and Andy Reid calling the plays for him. He's handing the ball to Kareem Hunt. He's got Eric Fisher at left tackle. He's got Mitchell Schwartz at right tackle. He's got Mitch Morse at center. Just both those guys were in really, really great situations. And Baker has good skill position players around him, but he's got a first-time play caller. He's got an offensive line deficiency, and I think sometimes this is the mistake that all of us on the outside make. We focus on the shiny objects when we should be looking at the meat and potatoes.
Right.
I mean, I don't know about you, but watching last night, it seemed a lot more relevant that Greg Robinson was bad than it was that Odell Beckham is good. I mean, I thought it was pretty obvious, and I think it's really just sort of indicative of what football's always been. And even in this age when teams are throwing the ball all over the yard and scoring 30 and 40 and 50 points, still what's most important when you're fielding a team.
One more thing about the Browns. You're hearing more and more of the whispers, of course, especially after last night. But what about the people that you're talking to in the league about Freddie Kitchens?
Yeah, and I love Freddie as I think Freddie's a great guy, and I think if they're patient with him, he'll make it work long term. But I mean, look, like he was given a roster that's got a lot of personality on it, a lot of strong people on it. And, the way John Dorsey built his team in Kansas City was a lot like this. They took risks there too. Marcus Peters was a risk when they drafted him in the first round. Tyreek Hill, obviously a risk for reasons that we've all seen in the time since he was drafted. The thing is, in Kansas City, John Dorsey was handing those guys to a guy with decades of experience as an NFL head coach. In this case, he's handing those guys to a first-year head coach. And so that's
was that all Dorsey, you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way John Dorsey's built his teams, and it's worked in a lot of cases. I mean, look, the return on Tyreek Hill is pretty good, right? I think what you think about him as a person, but as a player, he's been everything that you'd want more. And
what I mean specifically is the Kitchens hire, that kind of personality profile of a coach and background. Is that a Dorsey signature thing?
Yeah, I mean, Dorsey was the one who ultimately, gave Jimmy Haslam and the ownership group the thumbs up that this is going to be my guy. And so, I think that part of it is interesting because, again, it's a lot easier for like a Bill Belichick or an Andy Reid to take on risk, right? Bill Belichick drafts Aaron Hernandez out of the University of Florida. Andy Reid in Philadelphia trades for Terrell Owens. Well, when you've got some pelts on the wall, it can be a little easier to manage those sorts of situations. When you're a first-year head coach and you don't have a ton of experience to lean back on being in command, it can be a little bit more difficult. So I think Freddie's working through that stuff now. And then I think, the obvious thing is the personnel issue, which is right there on the offensive line. And what's so interesting about it too, Brooks, is like last night we're watching these two teams, right? A lot of people were talking about San Francisco last year the way they were talking about Cleveland this year. And the people with the 49ers would have told you last year, I think people are getting a little ahead of themselves here. We're not there yet. We've still got a little ways to go in building our team. And so San Francisco now, I think, is what everybody thought they were going to be last year. And you heard the same sort of stuff talking to Browns people in the spring and the summer. We're not where we need to be from a depth standpoint. We still have some work to do on the offensive line. And so, I think all of us on the outside might have gotten a little ahead of ourselves in putting the Browns in the NFL hierarchy where we did.
Visiting with Albert Breer, Money Quarterback, Sports Illustrated. My thought after watching Bruce Allen's press conference yesterday was Dan Snyder fired the wrong guy. And I know you mentioned this a little bit in passing on Twitter, why Bruce Allen is still there. Can you provide a little insight into why he still would be there?
I mean, I like what I've heard. And again, what's interesting about this it's been a moving target. He was very involved in the football side. When Mike Shanahan was there, Mike obviously had final say over everything when he was the head coach in Washington. But, Bruce was the GM. They wind up firing Mike, and the reason Bruce survived is because he was close to the owner and because he's got the family legacy in Washington with his dad having been the coach there in the 70s, right? And so, then Jay comes in, and all of a sudden the roster doesn't look like it's in great shape. So what does he do? He hires Scott McCloughan. 2 years later, he's firing Scott McCloughan. He's moving back into football because, ultimately he wants to be involved in football. And so there's been this sort of moving parts thing to Bruce Allen finding a way to stay employed there. And right now, what you hear is the reason Bruce Allen is still there is because he's got the owner convinced that he's the key to building a stadium and getting a stadium, whether it's in D.C. or Virginia or Maryland. His brother's a politician in Virginia. And, I think he's convinced the owner that he's got the political clout in that region where he's going to be instrumental in getting a new stadium built. And so right now, that'd be the best answer I could give you as far as why does he have a job. I think, A, it's relationship that he's built with the owner, which is an important piece of this and always an important piece in these situations. And then B, I think is that he's convinced the owner that he's a very, very important piece to getting a new stadium deal done.
Interesting developments. The release of Ben Watson by the Patriots and Gronk, we find out, is now going to Fox as an analyst.
Yeah.
Some people were speculating that the Watson departure might be opening up some cap space for Gronkowski to come back. What's that situation now?
I mean, the people around Gronkowski will maintain that he's happy, where he's at. And I would say that, when I visited with Gronk after the Super Bowl last year, you could tell that there's a sense of relief that he'd gotten out of the season, and he didn't need a fourth back surgery. And those back surgeries can affect your quality of life later in life. I know he's very happy to have avoided that. And it took a lot for him to get through the last 2 years. And so, he'd been thinking about retirement for a while. He's got 3 rings. He's taken care of himself financially. To me, it's hard for me to see what's going to motivate him to come back, because I don't think he's one of these guys that was sitting around September and October and thinking to himself, what have I done? I don't think he was ever that guy. I would say this, though. I do think that it's been communicated to him how valuable it is to sort of keep that carrot out there for the public, and how that keeps him in the news and keeps him relevant. And so I do think that there's that piece of it, where, if he plays that game, it sort of makes his brand a little bit more valuable, right? Hey, I might be thinking about this, or I'm not closing the door on this.
Totally.
It makes him more newsworthy. I mean, that's why we're talking about it, right?
Right.
I don't know if he's privately closed that door, but I do think that he's been told, if you publicly keep that door open, it is going to help you from a business standpoint. I certainly think there's evidence that it has.
One more thing for you. I don't know if you know who Bruce Hooley is, former guy with the Cleveland Plain Dealer, longtime talk show host with Chris Spielman. Bruce said to me last week on the show, we were talking about Urban Meyer and his ultimate destination, and he indicated to him that Ryan Day is a pro coach in waiting, and he wouldn't be surprised if Urban slid back into Ohio State. But more specifically, what's your thoughts on Ryan Day? Because I know you've observed him closely.
Right. And I think, I don't think he's quite to Lincoln Riley's level. What I would tell you right now, Brooks, Lincoln Riley is the NFL's white whale. Lincoln Riley is the guy at the college level right now that I think will be, I think every team that has an opening this offseason will contact Oklahoma just to test the water and see if he wants to leave. I don't think Lincoln Riley needs to leave. I don't think Lincoln Riley should leave unless it's a perfect situation. And I think ultimately down the line that could wind up being Dallas. But right now, I think he's got a better situation at Oklahoma than he would in 70, 80% of the NFL. I think Ryan Day is getting there because he's got some of the same strengths that Lincoln Riley has. He's a great developer of quarterbacks. Lincoln Riley, part of him making his name, he developed Baker Mayfield in the first overall pick, then develops Kyler Murray into the first overall pick. Now he's doing great work with Jalen Hurts. What's Ryan Day doing? Develops Dwayne Haskins into a first-round pick. Now it looks like he's going to develop Justin Fields into a first-round pick. He's so innovative. He's creative. He does all these different things, and he's shown that he can toggle being a head coach and an offensive play caller. In a lot of ways, these guys have similar strengths to Sean McVay. And so I think Ryan Day is moving into that category where Lincoln Riley has been for the last year or two. And I think both those guys will get calls from NFL teams. Ultimately, those guys are making so much money now. Lincoln already, and I think Ryan will get there if he takes Ohio State where I think he's taking them, where the gap between what you're making in the NFL and what you'd make in college isn't that much different. And I think for both those guys, they probably look at it and say, I've got job security here. I'm making a lot of money. I'm the king of the city that I'm in. It's going to take a lot for me to leave. I think either of those guys would be of that mind right now.
What are your thoughts on Ohio State?
I don't know how you couldn't be pretty positive about what's happened so far, Brooks. I mean, you tell me. Justin Fields.
I still think it's impossible to know, but then again, you look at their schedule until we get to the playoff. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like they had a 6-game preseason. But
I will say this. I think recruiting rankings matter. Urban Meyer had a number 2 recruiting class in 2018 or 2017, the number 2 recruiting class in the country in 2018. This is as much as it's Ryan Day doing a good job, Jeff Hafley on defense doing a good job. They have the horses. I mean, there are first-round picks all over the place in that roster, and I think that's a gigantic piece of this. And when we get to December and January, will they be able to compete with Alabama and Clemson? We'll see. But I certainly think that it's hard to argue that they have the same sorts of horses that an Alabama or a Clemson or a Georgia has.
Thanks a lot for jumping on. I really appreciate it, Bert. Thank you.
You got it, Brooks.
That's Albert Breer of Monday Morning Quarterback. You can get him on Twitter at Albert Breer, one word, and as good as it gets. Coherent, unlike me. Concise, unlike me. Professional, unlike me. Right? Laser focused. A lot of information. Not many guys like him, especially in the NFL. The real deal. And he's going to be remaining at Sports Illustrated. I don't know if you've been following the Sports Illustrated situation, but it's kind of blown up in the last week or so. Half the staff has been laid off, the editorial staff. They're bringing in a third party, this kind of, content company that I think has hired some ex-sports writers and will use people who are working for free to contribute to Sports Illustrated, believe it or not. But there's still a lot of people there who are outstanding and make it a destination. That hasn't changed. And I think the centerpiece of it all is what Bert's in charge of, MMQB, Monday Morning Quarterback. It's an absolute must visit over at Sports Illustrated online. But I will say this about the Sports Illustrated situation. The demise of that company and the magazine and everything about it has been so telegraphed for so long, right? That at this point, it's not that obviously your heart goes out to people that lose their job. It's brutal. Hate it. And letting. Surprise. And you've got these corporate raiders of sorts, right? This James Heckman and Ross Levinson, who ran the LA Times into the ground, and they ran Rivals and Scout into the ground. And here they are now to suck all the blood, which they're going to do probably, out of SI. And they're bringing this fly-by-night company in, content company, to turn it into, I saw Deadspin had an article about it, a content mill. I love that. You just drop the word mill into something. Puppy mill, content mill, right? So, but I got a sense that maybe I wasn't alone, because the groundswell for the people, unfortunately, that were laid off by Sports Illustrated, this has been such a long time coming. And we're kind of, I think that, who was it? I think it was Andy Staples, who's now at The Athletic, I think, was tweeting about it. And Andy Staples said, I went through 13 layoffs. He survived 13, which is kind of my whole point. It had happened so many times, and the management there has been so brutal. Except, really, there's some notable exceptions. Ross Dellinger, of course, college football. We have him on all the time, and there's others. But Albert Breer is the best in the business, when it comes to the NFL, and they are thankfully keeping that completely intact, which is a good move. So we've been talking about the Chinese situation, the situation in China with the NBA, Daryl Morey. And I said it from the top, don't call it the Daryl Morey tweet story. What do you call it? I don't know. It's international story. I love that word bizarre. For him to say that, Steve Kerr, of all people, someone who can't wait to opine on, high-flying events around the country, whatever they may be, politics, and on Twitter. And make no mistake, he is not just limited. And look, man, I got no problem with Steve Kerr. It's just in this situation, after all of the commentary you provided us over the years, for you to sit there and think we're that stupid that you can say, Well, I'm just following along with everybody. You're in the NBA, bro. What are you talking about? The Warriors are the second most popular team in China. You'll have us believe, oh, you're just following along. You're not talking to any, you have no idea what's going on over there. Right. Maybe he doesn't. But for someone who seems to know so much about so many different things normally, bit of a disconnect, a bit of a lack of credibility. Yeah, right. Bizarre international story. No, you're just being disingenuous and counting on the clapping seals of the media just going along. I mean, it's like, I don't know if you saw the video of Nick Bosa last night in the Niners, right? If you go to my timeline, just scroll down my timeline and you can see that